ourlifehomeschooling.com, where I blog to encourage moms. Recently, I've run into so many friends and acquaintances who have decided to step out and homeschool their kids. Many of them because of COVID-19, but a lot of them also just for personal choice. And so I got this idea to start this blog of sharing the experiences of lots of different homeschool families. And I've been spending my summer interviewing moms and collecting their resources, their favorite read alouds, hearing their stories of how they ended up to be homeschooling their kids. And I will be sharing them in the next couple weeks. I'm excited to put them out there and to be able, hopefully, to help a lot of moms and dads who are looking for resources. So I thought before I put out some of those posts that I would start by sharing our story.
So my name is Nelson, and this is my wife, Sheri, and we've been married for 20 years, just had our 20th anniversary, and we have 8 children, and we live in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So to start off, we'll just talk about our experience, and why don't you explain how we kind of got into homeschooling and what led us there.
Okay, so this was over 15 years ago. I was a teacher in the public schools in Virginia. I loved teaching. I loved the kids. I loved learning. I wanted to learn about everything in the world with my kids. And we both at that time had careers and were just kind of in that path. But I was frustrated because I felt so limited in school just by all the administrative work, all the paperwork. Things were constantly changing, and I felt like I had so little time to do what I really wanted to do, which was just teach the kids and learn things with them. And that was a little bit of a frustration for me. I also, it was my second or third year, I'm not sure, I had a kid come into my class in the middle of the school year. His name was Brad. He had been homeschooled up until that point, and I kind of had my own idea of what homeschoolers looked like at that point. And when he came into my room, I had these expectations, and he totally blew them away. He was very smart. He would finish everything I gave him quickly, and then he would get out a book which was many grade levels above the grade level I was teaching, and would sit in the back of the room and read these books that were just for kids much older than him. And he wasn't just smart, he was well liked by everyone. He was fun, he was funny, he was just a leader in our class, and it really undermined all the preconceived ideas that I had of homeschoolers. And so that was kind of maybe the first time I warmed a little bit to it, and he just kind of changed everything for me. So fast forward a couple years, we both had our careers. We kind of had this, we were both doing our own thing, and we were ready to have a family. We had been working for 5 years. We had our first son, Ty, and I made the hard decision to stay home with him, which I had always wanted to stay home with him, but it was still a really hard decision because I had to give up. We had to cut our income in half, and I had to give up the respect that comes with having a career when you stay home, you just stay home.
Yeah, and that was a big change for us. But when we had first gotten married, and Sheri had mentioned about wanting to stay home with our kids when we had kids, I was all for it and didn't give it a second thought. I was excited that she wanted to do that, and I think a big reason for that was when I grew up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and so she was always there at the house. She was just a constant for us, which gave us stability in the home, and was just that calm reassurance that we could have as kids and growing up. So when she had mentioned the idea of staying home with her kids, I was all for it, even though that meant, giving up half of our income to be able to do that. But we had kind of planned for that, and before she stopped working, we tried to live on my income. So when she did stop working, it wouldn't be as much of a shock to our standard of living. So I think we were able to make the transition a little bit easier because we made the adjustments beforehand.
Yeah, it was a big change, as I'm sure it is for all parents when they have their first child. I loved being a mom. I just adored our son, and of course eventually all of our kids, and I loved staying home, but it was a sacrifice for us at that time. But I began to feel like all those things I loved about teaching, I couldn't wait to show him things and to watch him do things and to watch him learn how, just to do simple tasks, putting puzzles together and, learning about all the animals. And so fast forward a couple years, when it was time for him to enter kindergarten, we started obviously really thinking, what are we going to do? And at that time we had 3 kids. Ty was 4, Luke was maybe 2 or 3, and then we had a baby, Jenna. And at that point, I had already kind of warmed to homeschooling because of some of these experiences, but you were working swing shifts, and that was a big factor for us, because if Ty would have gone to school, then he would have only seen you, a couple days a week. And so that was a huge factor for us starting out. So,
well, I think that coupled with the some of the limitations that you had as a teacher, those over the few years that you did teach, and then also my schedule, working swing shifts, those two combined were, I think, pretty big factors into the idea of staying home and wanting to homeschool.
Yeah, so we stepped out and decided to try it. It was never meant to be a permanent thing, but we just started to try it. And of course, being a former public school teacher, my first thing I did was, I had been a school teacher in Virginia. I printed off the Virginia state standards and for kindergarten, and I wanted to make sure that we were in line with all of those. I wanted him to have an excellent education. So I started with kind of that path for me, and we were trying to make sure we were keeping up. I wanted him to be on grade level, if not ahead of grade level. But as we kept going, it started shifting, because I started finding that he was ahead of the standards in some areas, and in other areas, I just didn't really care about some of those things. There were other things that I felt like were more important and I wanted to spend our time on. Just what I had wanted and what became important to both of us for him just didn't exactly line up with everything that was prescribed in those state standards. So I started just questioning, what is education? What is learning? What's important? What do we want our kids to learn? And we had a lot of these conversations, especially in the beginning. And as Christians who operate from a Christian worldview, we see everything that is known and that is as coming from a creator who made us. And so all of these things that we're learning, whether they're relationships in math or observations in science or art or music, language, all these things are his design. and it's what he created. He created these things for us. And that when we learn about math, when we are learning about any of these things, we're learning about him and his design. These are all things that he made. We're just discovering them. And at that point, education started changing in my mind and becoming more of wanting to show my kids what an awesome God and what an awesome design and what awesome ideas that he has planned. Let's discover them. Let's find out about them. And so discipleship really became more of a driving force for me. I wanted them to learn about our great God and his great design. And on top of that, I would say we had a lot of practical skills that we really wanted them to learn about, how to manage your money, a lot of life skills, things we wanted them to learn to be able to do around our house that really are kind of hard to teach when you're gone all day. So that's pretty much how we...
Yeah, and I was going to jump in on the worldview thing as well, but, we had a class in college. One of our gen ed classes in college was basically discovering and identifying your worldview, and what should our worldview be as Christians. And obviously it would be a Christian worldview. Where does everything start? What's our purpose? What does God have for us? What's our purpose in life? How do we, your worldview is a baseline for how you view everything, a lens that you view the world and how you see everything. So there's not a, so the most important aspect for that would be in education, where to have a Christian worldview and to be able to teach our kids that education starts with God, and to look at education through the lens of God and through the scriptures. And I think that was important for us. And then, like Sheri said, as far as the practical skills, some things that we missed out on in our high school experience, whether it be personal finance, knowing how to manage your money, getting a credit card, things like that. I had no idea. I went to college and they had offers for a credit card, and I signed up because it sounded like a good idea, and I got a T-shirt and a plastic cup. So thankfully I didn't throw myself into debt, but just having the knowledge of credit and finance earlier in my life would have helped out. And also other practical things like doing things with your hands and learning certain skills that you might not get just in a typical education setting that we could provide here in our home.
So if we would try to describe a typical day, you've been here somewhere. I mean, I do most of the schooling in our house, the academic schooling, I guess you could say. But he's been here several mornings. Occasionally he'll have a day off or a morning off when we're doing school. So what would you say a typical day looks like?
So typical day, once the kids get up and we are able to have breakfast together, which I think that we might have missed out on that point. Another great thing, because when we started in homeschooling, I had swing shifts. Homeschooling gave us the flexibility to teach the kids when I was around, or to be able to
flex with your schedule.
To flex with.
Yes, to be able to flex with his schedule.
Right, and the great thing about homeschooling is, if we wanted to go, away for the weekend, we were able to do that because of making our own schedule. So that was kind of great. And then also going back to our day-to-day, what our day-to-day looks like, if I am here and able to get up and we can have breakfast together, and then so the kids would start into their morning routine, which they would all start out with their Bible reading, and so have a little quiet time in the morning before they get into their actual regular schoolwork, where they have their Bible reading, and then they'll each start into their individual kind of self-paced stuff that they do, and then we're there to kind of give some guidance and help when they need it. I helping out with math. The more elementary math I could help out with, the more advanced math that Ty was going through this past year, which was what, Algebra 2?
Algebra 1.
Algebra 1, okay.
Well, then this year Geometry, but he had
Geometry, okay. So not as easy for me to just jump in and figure out where he's at and how to help out with that. But certainly to be able to answer questions and float around and help the kids out. So they do that in the morning, and then they have a little bit of a break time, or there's some space before lunch that they can play and do whatever they want. And then we'll have lunch together, and then after lunch, I think you usually had put the youngest ones down for a nap, and then you would be doing some reading with all the kids together, or whatever book you were reading through. And then I think after that, that's probably when I went to work, and then they would do some other individual things that they had to finish out, whether it be history or science. Does that sound about right?
That's pretty good. Yeah. In the morning we have breakfast together, and we do a couple things at the table that we could do as a group, but then the kids move to their individual independent work in the morning, which this has really changed over the years, because when I first started out, and you start with your first child in kindergarten, you're doing a lot more one-on-one work with a lot more, and then eventually more kids. But at this point, right now, most of our kids are pretty independent. So their morning is their independent work. We break around 11 and go outside, have lunch, and then around 1 o'clock, our youngest kids go down, which is right now just William and Julia, a 2 and 3-year-old. And they go down for naps, and then that's when I read to them. We read just a fun chapter book, but also I read to them their science or any individual work that I need to do with the kids that I haven't been able to really focus on with them in the morning. I try to get done in the afternoon when it's quiet and I can work one-on-one with them. So
yeah, and so if that's going on, like if I'm not home and I would be at work by the time I get home from work in the afternoon, she's pretty much wrapping up school. And the great thing about homeschooling is that they don't have any homework. So
yes.
They are done with the school. And so when I get home, everybody is ready to go outside and we can spend some time together, usually a decent amount of time before we have to start thinking about dinner. And then, of course, the evening together. So the flexibility and just the schedule, I think, was a huge appeal for us. Mm-hmm. And also, again, going back to the Christian worldview and just being able to teach our kids from that perspective rather than having to, have them learn different things or things that maybe we wouldn't want them to focus on, that we can put their direction to focus in certain areas that maybe they have an interest in, and also that we feel is important rather than just a standard of learning that the state has set forward. So.
Yeah. So a lot of people wonder, how do you teach multiple kids of multiple ages? And I can see how people wonder that, because I think I would have wondered that myself. But for us...
How do you do it?
Well, for us, we just started with one child. We started when Ty was in kindergarten, and I started teaching him how to read. That's where we started. And once he was becoming independent with reading, I started teaching him to write. Of course, all along this time, I was reading to him a lot. That's one of my favorite things to do with our kids, is to read with them. So I was reading to him a lot, and once he got going with reading and writing, we started math. And those three things he became, slowly became more independent at. And a lot of his science and history would come from our readings together. And, then we had the second child, Luke, and when I started working with him to read, at that point, Ty was becoming more and more independent. So it is a juggle for sure, especially when you have a baby and a toddler, and you're trying to homeschool other kids. But it happened for us just like it does for everybody else, just one at a time. And that oldest child becomes more independent and is able to, I've really pushed them towards being more independent and taking ownership of their work. When they find something that they are really interested in, I say, go for it. Let's learn this. You pursue this if this is something that you're interested in. And so that's kind of how it changed for our older kids. They just became more and more independent, and I became more of a facilitator with them as their independence grew. And then I've always been working more one-on-one with our youngest kids who are just starting out and learning. So that's pretty much our story. And can you think of anything else to add?
No, I don't think I can. We'll think of it after.
Yeah. So that's our story, and I'm really excited to be able to share the posts of all the homeschool moms that I've been interviewing. I hope they're a big encouragement to a lot of people, and I'll be sharing them in the next couple weeks.